It all began on an ordinary afternoon in a quiet suburban neighborhood, where a young black girl named Aliyah sat outside a grocery store, waiting for her mom to pick her up after school. Her backpack was scuffed, her clothes simple, and her hair tied back in a messy ponytail. She looked like any other kid, innocent, patient, and unaware that the next few minutes would change how people saw her and her mother forever, because when a police officer approached her that day, what started as a simple misunderstanding would expose the weight of assumptions and the quiet power of truth. The sun was dipping behind the buildings, painting the sky with soft streaks of orange and purple. Aliyah sat on the curb outside Miller's grocery, humming to herself, checking her phone every few minutes for a message from her mom. She wasn't worried. Her mother was often late because of work. That was normal. But what wasn't normal was the suspicious glance from a man sitting in a police car across the street. Officer Tom Riley, a mid-aged patrol cop with a history of overzealous stops, had been circling the area for an hour. When his eyes landed on Aliyah sitting alone, his assumptions kicked in like clockwork. He pulled his car up beside her, rolled down his window, and called out, "Hey kid, what are you doing out here?" Aliyah looked up, polite but cautious. "Just waiting for my mom." Riley stepped out of his car. "This isn't exactly a playground. Where's your mom?" "She's at work. She'll be here soon." "What does she do?" he asked, narrowing his eyes. "She's in the Special Forces," Aliyah said simply, looking him dead in the eye. Riley laughed, not the kind of laugh you share with someone, but the kind that cuts deep. "Special Forces, huh? That's a new one. What's next?" "Your dad's the president." Aliyah frowned. "No, sir. She really is." Riley folded his arms, his voice dripping with disbelief. "You expect me to believe that? Maybe you should tell me the truth before you get yourself in trouble." Aliyah's face flushed with frustration. "I'm not lying." "And what's your mom's name?" "Soldier's Kid. Maya Jefferson." Riley smirked. "And where exactly does this Sergeant Jefferson work?" "You know, since she's apparently saving the world?" "I don't know," Aliyah said softly. "She doesn't tell me everything. It's secret." That was the wrong answer for Riley. He rolled his eyes and stepped closer. "Secret missions. Got it. How about you tell me where you actually live and what you're really doing out here?" Aliyah stood up, her voice trembling but firm. "I told you. I'm waiting for my mom. She'll be here soon." Riley leaned closer, towering over her, his tone sharpening. "You know lying to a police officer is a crime, right?" The words hit like a slap. Tears stung Aliyah's eyes, not from fear, but from helplessness. People passed by, glancing but not interfering. She clenched her fists, whispering, "You'll see when she gets here." "Sure, sweetheart," Riley mocked. "Can't wait to meet your superhero mom." And so, the two stood there, one smug in his authority, the other holding back tears as the world around them carried on, unaware that justice was already on its way, wearing combat boots and a name badge that would soon silence the laughter. At that same moment, miles away, Sergeant Maya Jefferson was finishing a debrief at Fort Campbell's secure compound. Her team had just returned from a classified humanitarian mission overseas, one that had stretched their limits and tested every ounce of discipline. Exhausted but steady, she removed her gloves, ready to head home. That's when her phone buzzed. It was a message from Aliyah. "Mom, a cop doesn't believe you're in the Special Forces. He's being mean." For a woman trained to stay calm under gunfire, it took all her strength not to snap her phone in half. She didn't even change out of her uniform. She grabbed her keys, her car, and sped down the road with her heart pounding harder than it ever did in combat. When she arrived at the grocery store, she spotted the scene instantly, her daughter standing near a patrol car, her face downcast, and a uniformed officer smirking beside her. Maya's jaw clenched. She parked, stepped out, and walked with a deliberate calmness that carried more authority than a shout ever could. Officer Riley turned at the sound of boots hitting the pavement. He frowned at the sight of the woman in full fatigues, name patch visible, combat boots scuffed, unit insignia gleaming under the fading light. "Ma'am," he said flatly, "is this your daughter?" "Yes," Maya replied coolly, her voice edged with command. "Is there a reason you're interrogating her?" "Well," Riley said, shrugging, "she was sitting here alone, and when I asked, she told me her mom's in the Special Forces. I think you can understand why I might have been skeptical." Maya stepped closer, her stare cutting through him. "No, officer. I don't understand why. What about that sounds funny to you?" Riley hesitated. I mean you don't see that every day." "Maybe because people like you don't expect to," she replied coldly. "Maybe because when you see a young black girl waiting alone, your first instinct isn't to help, it's to doubt." Riley's face turned red. He tried to recover. "Ma'am, I didn't mean any disrespect." "Disrespect," Maya snapped, her tone calm but deadly. "You laughed at my daughter for telling the truth. You treated her like a liar for no reason other than your assumptions. You know what that's called? Prejudice in uniform." The officer's voice faltered. "I didn't realize, of course." "You didn't," she cut in. "Because people like you never think it's you until someone in uniform outranks your ignorance." The air grew still. Riley finally noticed the patches, the elite Special Forces insignia on her sleeve, the name Jefferson printed above her heart, and the ribbons that marked valor and service. His smirk vanished, replaced by pure disbelief. Maya turned to her daughter, kneeling beside her. You okay, baby? Aliyah nodded slowly. He didn't believe you. Maya smiled faintly. He does now. Then she rose, looking straight into Riley's eyes. Next time, when a child tells you something about their parents, maybe listen before you laugh. Her words carried the weight of 1,000 unspoken stories of soldiers who looked like her but were never seen. As such, until they had to prove it. She took Aliyah's hand, turned around, and walked away. Behind them, Riley stood frozen, the sound of his own silence louder than any apology he could offer. By the next day, the story had exploded across social media. A bystander had recorded the whole thing from the moment Riley laughed at Aliyah to the instant Maya stepped out of her car in uniform. The clip was barely 2 minutes long, but it captured everything wrong with the world in those few seconds. Millions watched as a mother's quiet strength shattered ignorance without raising her voice. News outlets picked it up. Some praised Maya for her composure, others condemned Riley's behavior. The police department issued a public statement, calling it a training opportunity. But for the community, it was more than that. It was proof that even heroes aren't immune to judgment when their skin color doesn't match someone's expectations. At home, Maya tried to keep things normal. She didn't care about fame or viral attention. But for Aliyah, everything had changed. She began to see her mother not just as the woman who packed her lunches or reminded her to do homework, but as someone who carried the weight of courage quietly, without needing applause. One evening, Aliyah asked softly, Mom, do you ever get tired of proving who you are? Maya looked at her for a long moment before answering. Every day. But I don't prove it for them. I prove it for you. So one day, you won't have to. Aliyah nodded, tears glimmering in her eyes. You didn't even yell at him. You just stood there. That's the thing about strength, Maya said. Real power doesn't shout. It stands still until the world has no choice but to listen. Months later, when Maya was called for another overseas mission, Aliyah walked her to the car and hugged her tight. Go show them again, Mom. And as the taillights disappeared down the road, Aliyah whispered to herself, she doesn't need to prove anything anymore. They already know who she is. That day, a lesson was burned into her heart, that respect isn't given by badges or uniforms. It's earned through truth, dignity, and the courage to stand tall even when laughter tries to belittle it, because in the end, the cop who laughed would forget the moment in time, but the girl who stood there, believing in her mother's strength, would remember forever, the day the world learned what real heroes look like.